Welcome back to another Roblox Studio tutorial. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can grow and shrink a player. So in this example, I'm using buttons. So over here, I have a grow button that makes the player larger. I have a normal button, which is the default size. And then I have a shrink button, which is a much smaller size. And you can go between these three different modes by just clicking on the button. Alright, so let's go ahead and dive in and see how we can do this in Roblox Studio. Alright, so let's go ahead and start by designing the buttons, and then we'll work on the script for it. So the first thing we're going to do is click on the UI button up here. We're going to be inserting a screen GUI. Inside the screen GUI, we're going to be starting with a frame. Go ahead and drag that frame to wherever you want on the screen. We're going to be using the size property to scale it so it looks good on all screen sizes. So to do that, we're going to locate the size property of the frame. In each grouping, we're going to be changing the second number to 0. So we're going to change that one to 0 and also this one to 0. And then to make it scaled, we're going to be using the first number in each grouping. So for this one, it's going to be the percentage of the screen going left to right. So let's go ahead and start with 10%, which we're going to write as 0.1. And then for the second grouping, we're going to put what percentage of the screen we want up and down. So let's go ahead and start with maybe 25% of the screen, which we'll write as 0.25. Okay, and if we want to make it just a little bit larger, let's try 0.3. And that looks pretty good. So next, let's go ahead and work on customizing this frame a little bit. So for the background color, I'm going to choose a light gray. I'm going to change the background transparency to 0.5. I'm going to change the border color to white. And then I'm going to change the pixel size to 3. And there we go. Next, I'm going to be adding a couple buttons inside this frame. To do that, I can just click on the plus sign and then click on text button. Let's go ahead and get this one resized, and then we'll just make copies of it. Once you click on the text button, we're going to locate the size option. Just like we did for the frame, we're going to make these numbers 0 to start with. In the first grouping, let's try 0.9. So this is going to be 90% of the frame, not 90% of the screen. And then for the Y part, let's try 0.25. So that's going to be 25% of the frame, not 25% of the screen. So whenever you have an object inside of another one, the size is going to refer to the parent object, so this is going to be 25% of the frame. Alright, that looks good. Next, I'm going to scroll down to the style section and take a look at some of these. Alright, so I like this one, but you're welcome to choose whatever you want to. The next thing we're going to do is scroll down to the text section, and we're going to change the text. So let's go ahead and change this one to grow. And then we're going to select text scaled so it fills out the button nicely. Let's go ahead and move this button a little bit. We're going to center it. And there we go. So once you have all the changes done for the first button, we can go and just make copies of that button. To do that, you can just right click and press duplicate. And then we're going to do that one more time. So now we have 3 buttons that we can drag and place wherever we want to. And all we have to do at this point is change the text on them. So for the second one, we're going to change that to normal. And for the last one, we're going to change it to shrink. Finally, before we get to the scripting, we're going to rename our objects. So we're just going to call it whatever the text says. So this is my grow button, so I'm going to rename it to grow. This one is my shrink button, so I'm going to rename it to shrink. And for the last one, I'm going to rename it to normal. So it doesn't matter if the order of these are different on your screen. As long as they match to what the text says, you're good. Alright, so now that we have that done, I'm going to delete this one, and we're going to work from the original one. So what we're going to do at this point is go ahead and add our local script. So we're going to click on the frame, click on the plus sign, and then click on local script. Okay, so let's go ahead and start this script by making a variable for our frame. So we'll say local frame. And that's going to be equal to script.parent. The next thing we're going to do is make a variable for each of our objects. So we'll start with local grow. And that's going to be equal to frame, which is where it's located, dot grow, which is the name of the object. We'll do the same for the other two. So we'll say local normal. It's going to be equal to frame dot normal. And then local shrink is going to be equal to frame dot shrink. The next set of variables is going to be our values for the grow, the normal, and the shrink. So we'll start by saying local grow underscore val, so it's going to be value, and we're going to set this equal to 2, so that's going to be 2 times the normal size. Local normal value, that's going to be equal to 1, so that's the original size, and then local shrink underscore val, and that's going to be equal to 0.5, so that's going to be like half the normal size. Next, let's go ahead and define the player, so we'll say local player is going to be equal to game dot players dot local player. Next, we're going to connect mouse clicks for each of these buttons to functions. Let's go and start with the grow button. We're going to start with grow dot mouse button 1 click. We're going to say colon connect. Inside here, we're going to put function. We'll put parentheses and then press enter. To change the size of the player, we actually need to change 4 properties of their size. Let's go and start with head scale. So we're going to say player dot character dot humanoid. And then we're going to say dot head scale dot value. And we're going to set this equal to whatever we have for our grow value. So we're just going to put grow underscore val. We're going to copy this line and paste it 3 more times. And then we're just going to change this part for the other 3. So the next property that we're going to be changing is going to be body, and then depth, scale. Next is going to be body, width, scale. And then for the final one, it's going to be body, height, and scale. So make sure they're exactly like this. So each word has a capital letter to start with. So it's the body depth scale, body width scale, and body height scale. And before we go any farther, let's go ahead and test this and make sure this part is working. So right now, the only button I have set up is the grow button. So when I click on grow, we can see that it works and the player got larger. So setting up the other buttons are going to be really easy now. So all I have to do is copy this one 2 more times. We're going to change the button that this connects to. So this is going to be the normal one. And this is going to be shrink. And finally, we just need to change the values. So this one is going to be for normal. So I'm just going to paste it here. And the final one is going to be shrink. And I'll paste them down here. And there we go. So for each button, we have a mouse click connected to a function. And inside that function, it's going to change the size of the player to whatever we set up here. Let's go ahead and test it out and make sure everything's working. Let's go and start with the grow button. We can see that the player gets larger. Normal, they're the normal size. And then for shrink, when we click it, we see that nothing happens. So whenever there's an error in the game, I always open up the output to see what the error message is. And then if I click on one of the error messages, it's going to bring me to the line in the code that's causing the error. And I can see here that I put shrink value instead of just shrink. Okay, so let's go and rerun the code and see if this fixes it. Okay, so we'll start over with grow. Looks good. Normal, that one looks good as well. And shrink, it's working now. If you want to, you can add additional things inside this function. So maybe when the player gets really big, you also want to make them really slow. To do that, we're going to change the walk speed of the player. So we can say player dot character dot humanoid dot walk speed. And let's set this equal to something pretty small. So the normal is 16, so let's try 5. And maybe when they're really tiny, I want to make them really fast. So let's give them a walk speed of 50. And when they're tiny, let's also give them a big jump boost. And let's say for tiny mode, I also want to give them increased jump power. I can do that. So I'm just going to change walk speed to jump power. And the default is 50, so let's double that and make it 100. And you just have to remember for any changes that you make for either the big mode or the small mode, that you want to reset it in the normal mode. So what I'm going to have to do is take these 2 lines right here and reset them to the defaults. So for walk speed, I would change this back to 16. And for the jump power, I would change that back to 50. You can also change the field of view. So for shrink mode, let's go ahead and increase it so it zooms in on the player. To do that, we'll say game dot workspace dot current camera. And then we'll say dot field of view. And we're going to set this equal to, let's start with 25 and see how that looks. And then I'll do the opposite thing for big mode. So for this field of view, let's go ahead and change it to 100. And then since I made changes to big and small mode, I want to reset it in the default mode. So let's copy that and put it here. And the default is 70. Okay, let's go ahead and test it out with these new changes and see how it looks. Okay, let's go ahead and start in big mode. All right, so I'm in big mode and you can see it starts a little bit zoomed out. So it looks almost like the normal view. If I walk though, I can see I'm pretty slow. I have only a 5 walk speed. Let's go back to normal mode. And we can see I have the normal walk speed. And if we go into shrink mode, we can see it zooms in on the player. This player also has a much faster walk speed, and they have a double jump distance. Alright, so there's a lot of different things you can do with this to customize it and make it your own. For now though, this is going to be the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next one.